My sister slapped my husband at dinner, and now she's begging me for money. My sister slapped my husband across the face at our mother's dinner table, in front of our whole family, because he wouldn't hire her husband for a warehouse job. A job her husband didn't get because he has 3 prior write-ups for stealing inventory at his last 2 jobs. Not he made a mistake once. 3 separate incidents, at 2 separate companies. And somehow, in my family, that makes my husband the bad guy. I want to tell you the whole thing because it didn't start at that dinner table. It started 4 years ago. And it ends with my sister posting my face on TikTok, calling me a heartless witch, and it backfiring on her so badly that I'm honestly still getting notifications about it 3 months later. Grab something to drink. This one's long. I'm 34. My name doesn't matter, so let's just say I'm Dana for this. My husband, I'll call him Mike, is 36, and he's an operations manager at a mid-sized regional distribution company. Warehouses, logistics, the whole supply chain thing. He's been there 11 years, worked his way up from the floor to management, and part of his job now is final sign-off on new hires for his warehouse. My sister, call her Renee, is 2 years older than me. She's always been the golden child. Homecoming queen, married the charming guy everyone loved, bought a house before we did, that whole thing. Her husband, I'll call him Chad, is the kind of guy who tells a great story at parties and somehow never has a steady job for more than 14 months. I found out later there was a reason for that. Chad had been out of work for about 5 months when he asked Mike, casually, at a 4th of July barbecue, if there were any openings at his warehouse. Mike said he'd look into it because that's just who Mike is. He doesn't hold grudges, he gives people chances. Chad applied, officially through HR like everyone else. And that's when things got complicated. 2 weeks after Chad applied, Mike came home looking like he'd swallowed a rock. I can't hire him, he told me. And I need you to know why, because your sister is going to hear about this eventually, and I don't want you blindsided. Turns out. Background checks and reference calls at Chad's last 2 jobs turned up something Chad had never mentioned to anyone in the family. At his job before that, a big box retail store, he'd been written up twice for inventory shrinkage tied directly to his shift and his badge scans. Not the whole store lost some stuff. Specific items, specific times, specific badge. He wasn't fired outright. The store apparently didn't want the paperwork hassle of pursuing it formally, but he was quietly let go a month later during a restructuring. At the job after that, a small electronics retailer, it happened again. Company laptops going missing, and again, it traced back to Chad's access logs. That time he was terminated for cause, no ambiguity. Mike didn't dig this up out of spite. This is standard procedure for anyone who'd be handling high-value inventory in a warehouse with 6-figure equipment, moving through it daily. HR ran it, HR flagged it, and by policy, Mike had 0 discretion to override it even if he wanted to. He didn't want to. He told me straight up, I like Chad as a person at a barbecue. I am not signing off on him having access to a warehouse full of product after seeing this. I agreed with him completely. I still do. I would have made the same call. The problem was nobody had told Renee any of this. Chad had spent 5 months telling her, and telling my mom, and telling everyone some vague story about the market being tough and companies not wanting to invest in employees anymore. My family had built this whole narrative that Chad was a hard worker, getting unlucky breaks. So when the rejection came through, Chad didn't tell Renee the real reason. He told her Mike blackballed him out of jealousy. That Mike had always resented how successful and popular Chad was. That Mike wanted to keep Chad down because deep down Mike was insecure about his own career. I want you to sit with how insane that is for a second. My husband, an operations manager with 11 years at one company, insecure about a guy who'd had 4 jobs in 6 years. But Renee believed it, because Renee always believes Chad. For 2 weeks, I noticed Renee getting cold with me over text. Short replies, left on read. I figured she was just busy. I did not know a story was being built about my husband in the group. Chad I wasn't part of, the one with my mom, Renee, and my other sibling, whom I'll call Josh. I only found out how deep it went at that Sunday dinner. My mom does a family dinner most Sundays. Nothing formal, just everyone at her table, kids running around, the usual noise. Mike and I showed up not knowing anything was wrong. We walked in, said hi to everyone, and I immediately felt the temperature in the room drop about 20 degrees. Renee wouldn't look at Mike. My mom kept giving me these tight, worried little smiles. Josh wouldn't meet my eyes either. I remember thinking, okay, something happened. Did I miss a birthday? What is going on? We sat down. Dinner started fine, small talk, somebody's kid's soccer game. Then Renee put her fork down. I remember this specifically because the sound of it hitting the plate was loud enough that conversation just stopped. And she looked directly at Mike and said, "So are you going to explain yourself, or are we all just pretending you didn't ruin my husband's life?" Mike, to his credit, stayed completely calm. He said, "Renee, I think there's been a misunderstanding about what happened with Chad's application. Can we talk about this after dinner, privately?" "No," she said. "I want everyone to hear this. I want everyone to know what kind of person you are." She launched into it, the jealousy story, the "you've always hated that Chad is more successful than you" story, the "you humiliated him on purpose" story. My mom was nodding along like this was gospel. Josh was staring at his plate, not saying anything, which honestly hurt almost as much because he knew the truth and said nothing. Mike tried again. He said, calmly, "Renee, I didn't make this decision out of personal feelings. There's a documented history at his last 2 jobs that HR flagged. I'm not able to talk about the specifics, that's confidential, but I promise you this wasn't personal." Renee stood straight up out of her chair. "Don't you dare," she said, "sit there and slander my husband to protect your fragile ego." And then she slapped him. Open hand, across the face, hard enough that I heard it before I fully processed what had happened. Hard enough that the sound made my mom's dog start barking from the other room. The table went dead silent. Mike didn't even raise his hand to his cheek. He just sat there, red mark blooming on his face, looking at Renee with this expression I'd never seen on him before, not anger, more like grief. Like he was watching someone he loved reveal something ugly he couldn't unsee. I stood up. I said, "Renee, what is wrong with you?" And she turned on me. "What's wrong with me? He's the one who took food off my family's table. We might lose our house, Dana. Chad has been applying everywhere and getting rejected everywhere. And it's because your husband decided to make an example out of him." That's when it clicked for me, really clicked, that Renee didn't know. She genuinely, completely did not know about the stealing. Chad had built her a whole fake reality, and she had slapped my husband defending a lie. I looked at my mom. "Did you know about this?" She wouldn't answer. I looked at Josh. He finally said quietly, "I heard something about issues at his old job." I didn't know it was that serious. So Josh knew something. My mom, I still don't know for sure, but her silence told me enough. Mike stood up, said very quietly, "I think we should go," and we left. Renee didn't apologize. Nobody stopped us. Nobody even really said anything as we walked out, which honestly told me everything about where the family's loyalties sat. We sat in the car in my mom's driveway for probably 10 minutes without saying a word. Then Mike said, "I'm not going to fight you on whatever you want to do here. But I need you to know I'm not going back to a table where that's allowed to happen to me." I told him I wasn't asking him to. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying it, the sound of the slap, my mom's silence, Josh looking at his plate. And somewhere around 3 a.m., lying awake next to Mike while he iced his cheek, I made a decision. For 4 years, I had been quietly helping my family financially. Not huge, dramatic amounts, but consistent ones. I covered part of my mom's property tax bill every spring because her fixed income didn't stretch far enough. I'd paid Renee and Chad's car insurance for 8 months 2 years ago when Chad was between jobs. I'd sent Josh rent money more than once. All told, I was probably averaging around $600, $800 a month across the family, sometimes more. I decided that night, it stops, all of it, immediately. The next morning I called my mom first, because I wanted her to hear it from me directly and not through the group chat. I told her, "After what happened last night, I'm done financially supporting anyone in this family. That includes the property tax help. I love you, but my husband got assaulted at your table and nobody defended him, so I can't keep pouring money into people who let that happen." My mom cried. She said I was being dramatic, that it was just a slap. Renee's emotional. "You're going to punish everyone over one bad moment?" I told her it wasn't about the slap in isolation. It was about the fact that an entire family sat there and let a lie fester for 2 weeks and Then let it turn physical. And nobody, not one person, stood up for Mike. Not until it was already happening. Renee found out I'd stopped the car insurance and the emergency loans within about 3 days, because, surprise, Chad still hadn't found a job. And the money had actually been more critical to their household than I think even I realized. That's when things got loud. She texted me a wall of messages. I'm going to paraphrase because it was genuinely unhinged, but the gist was, I was punishing her kids, they don't have kids, this was aimed at guilt-tripping me anyway. I was choosing money over family. I was just like Mike, cold and calculating, and my personal favorite, that I was abandoning her in her time of need out of pure spite. I responded once. I said, "You slapped my husband over a job rejection caused entirely by your own husband's actions he lied to you about for months. I'm not obligated to fund a household built on that lie. If Chad wants a job, he can be honest about his history and find one that's a fit. That's not my problem to solve financially anymore." She didn't respond to that. Instead, 4 days later, she went to social media. She posted on TikTok a long, tearful video, no names but obviously about me. Obviously about Mike, saying she'd been cut off financially by a family member out of pure cruelty during the hardest time of her life, that her husband was the victim of workplace discrimination and blacklisting, and that some people choose money over blood. It got a decent amount of traction in her local mom group circles. Maybe 15, 20,000 views, a lot of sympathetic comments. Except, somebody who knew Chad from his old retail job saw the video, and they left a comment. A very specific, very detailed comment, naming the store, describing the restructuring, and pointedly asking why nobody ever mentioned the actual reason Chad left. That comment got more traction than the original video's sympathetic ones combined. People started digging. Someone found a local news brief, tiny, buried from years back, about an employee investigation at that same store around that same time frame, no names, but the timing matched exactly. The narrative flipped in about 48 hours. The same comment section that had been calling me cold and cruel started calling Renee delusional and asking if she'd done any basic fact-checking before going online about her own husband. Renee deleted the video within a day, but by then it had already been screen-recorded and reposted with commentary a few times over. You know how that goes. Nothing really dies once it's out there. That's when Josh finally texted me, "I should have said something at dinner. I'm sorry. I knew part of this and I stayed quiet because I didn't want to be in the middle of it. That was wrong of me. I appreciated that more than I expected to. Here's where it gets almost too neat, but I promise you, this is exactly how it played out." About 6 weeks after the dinner, Chad finally landed a job, a different warehouse, a smaller regional company, lower pay than what he wanted but a job. 3 weeks into that job, he was caught on camera pocketing small electronics from a returns bin meant to be processed and restocked. Not a huge haul in dollar terms, but enough, and clearly documented, and this time the company did press charges instead of quietly letting him go. He was arrested. It made the local paper, small blurb, but small towns talk, and everyone in Renee's social circle who'd seen that TikTok saga put it together within a day. Renee called me the night it happened. Not to apologize, to ask for money for a lawyer. I said no. I told her, "Renee, I told you this stops. This isn't me being cruel, this is me watching exactly what I predicted happen. I'm not funding legal fees for a pattern of behavior I warned you about, that Mike's HR department flagged 8 months before this." She actually said, quietly, "I didn't believe him." About Mike being the problem, I think I knew deep down. I just didn't want it to be true, because if it was true, it meant I built a whole life around someone I couldn't trust. That was the first honest thing she'd said to me in the entire situation. Chad ended up taking a plea deal, some combination of restitution, probation, community service, no jail time, but a theft conviction now sits on his record permanently. Which means every future job application is going to have this exact same problem, except now it's not a quiet HR flag, it's public record. So here's where things stand now, 3 months out. Renee and Chad are separated, not divorced yet, but she moved in with my mom temporarily. Renee reached out to me about a month ago, not asking for money this time, just asking to talk. We met for coffee. She apologized for the slap, genuinely, and admitted she'd spent years making excuses for Chad that she didn't want to look at too closely. She said something that stuck with me. I think I slapped Mike because some part of me already knew the truth. And it was easier to be angry at him than to be angry at Chad. I told her I appreciated the apology, and that Mike deserved to hear it directly from her too, not through me. She hasn't done that yet. I'm not pushing it, that's on her timeline, not mine. My mom and I are speaking again, though there's still some tension. She's admitted she should have said something at the table instead of staying silent, and that the property tax help genuinely was something she'd come to depend on more than she should have. We're working out a version of support that isn't open-ended and isn't tied to me pretending things are fine when they're not. Josh and I are actually closer now than we were before any of this. Funny how that works. And Mike's doing great. He got a promotion 2 months ago, unrelated to any of this, just good timing. He still has zero regrets about the hiring decision. And honestly, watching everything play out exactly the way the paperwork predicted it would. I don't think anyone in my family would ask him to reconsider now, even if they could go back. The financial help to Renee and Chad specifically, that's done permanently. My mom, we're rebuilding on healthier terms. Josh never really needed ongoing help, that was more occasional, and honestly I'd help him again if he needed it, because he showed up when it mattered, eventually. People keep asking me if I regret cutting things off the way I did, so abruptly, so completely. I don't. My husband got hit in the face at a dinner table for telling the truth. And my family's first instinct was to side with the version of events that felt comfortable, instead of the one that was accurate. Money was the only language that made anyone stop and actually look at what they'd built. Sometimes the truth doesn't come out because someone confesses. Sometimes it comes out because the story people were told simply stops being sustainable, and reality does the talking for you. Anyway, that's the whole thing. If you made it this far, thanks for sitting through it with me.
Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story and want more fascinating Reddit tales, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and subscribe to Archives of Reddit. Turn on the notification bell so you never miss a new upload. Thanks for being here, and we'll see you in the next story.